The world had never felt so tense. From the bustling streets of cities to quiet villages far from the centers of power, people were hearing the same warnings and whispers. Strange signals had been picked up far beyond the solar system, signals that did not belong to any known satellite or probe. Governments tried to remain calm, but the evidence was undeniable. Something was coming, something unlike anything humanity had ever faced. In a high-rise control center overlooking a crowded city, analysts watched screens that flickered with streams of data. Every alert, every anomaly was scrutinized and cross-checked. Specialists whispered to each other in low voices, exchanging calculations and projections that no ordinary citizen could hope to understand. The tension in the room was palpable. It was as if the very air carried the weight of an approaching storm. Outside, people went about their routines, unaware of the scale of what was unfolding. But for some, the sense of unease was impossible to ignore. Families gathered in their living rooms, looking at the glowing screens that reported news from all corners of the world. Experts appeared on television, carefully explaining that the signals suggested an advanced fleet moving toward Earth's neighborhood. Every word was measured, yet the fear behind their calm faces was visible to those who looked closely. The nations of the world had long invested in space exploration and defense technology, but nothing had prepared them for this. They had imagined distant threats, asteroid collisions, or rogue satellites. They had imagined natural disasters or political conflicts on Earth, but never an unknown armada moving silently across the void of space. Military leaders and scientists convened emergency meetings, debating strategies and examining options. Each plan was weighed with meticulous care, but the one certainty was that humanity needed to act together. In a quiet laboratory, far from the centers of government, a scientist stared at a holographic projection of the incoming fleet. Her fingers hovered above the controls, hesitating as the gravity of the situation sank in. Years of study, of late nights and relentless calculations had led her to this moment. She had trained her mind to understand cosmic phenomena, to analyze data with precision, but now she felt the weight of uncertainty pressing on her like a physical force. Meanwhile, in a naval command center thousands of kilometers away, a fleet admiral studied the same projections. Every decision carried immense consequences. Every calculation could mean the difference between survival and catastrophe. He ran his hand across the smooth surface of the control panel, feeling the vibration of machinery that hummed with power. The ships being prepared for launch were unlike anything humanity had ever built. Yet even their advanced technology felt fragile in the face of the unknown. Soldiers, pilots, and engineers were being assembled from across the globe. Each person brought unique skills, training, and determination. It all shared the same mix of fear and resolve. Some were seasoned veterans, accustomed to high-stakes operations, while others were fresh recruits, their faces still reflecting the innocence of civilian life. The blend of experience and new energy gave the commanders hope that humanity might meet the coming challenge with strength. Families said their quiet goodbyes, sometimes in hurried whispers, sometimes with long, heartfelt embraces. Parents kissed children they might not see for months. Spouses held each other as if trying to memorize every detail of the other's face. Friends clasped hands and promised to stay in touch. The human stories behind the massive preparations were as varied as the people themselves. Courage was being measured not just in battles won, but in the simple act of stepping forward into uncertainty. In the midst of these preparations, a young technician worked tirelessly on the final calibrations of a critical communication system. His eyes were red from lack of sleep, his fingers moving almost automatically over the instruments. He remembered his childhood fascination with space, the nights spent staring at the stars and dreaming of exploring the universe. Now that dream was intertwined with duty, and the responsibility weighed heavily on him. A mistake here could cost lives. As the countdown to the fleet's assembly continued, tension spread through every level of society. News channels broadcast updates, mixing factual reporting with stories of individual bravery. Children asked questions that adults struggled to answer. Communities came together in unexpected ways. People who had never interacted before shared food, resources, and information. There was a sense of unity, born from fear but sustained by hope. Humanity, despite its flaws, was beginning to act as one. At the spaceports, where the largest ships were being prepared, teams worked around the clock. Engineers checked every system, pilots trained in simulated battles, and commanders reviewed strategies with relentless focus. The scale of the operation was staggering. Massive vessels built from years of research and development gleamed under the harsh lights of hangars. Every inch of their hulls represented human ingenuity, human perseverance, and human determination to survive. Outside, ordinary citizens watched as trucks and convoys moved supplies, as people in uniform came and went, and as the sky above sometimes glimmered with the trails of spacecraft leaving for orbit. Curiosity mixed with anxiety. Children pointed at the sky, imagining what might be coming, while adults tried to maintain calm, even as they wondered if anything could prepare them for what was ahead. In conference rooms around the world, leaders made difficult decisions. Every option carried risk. Every hesitation could prove fatal. They debated the best ways to deploy the fleet, how to communicate with citizens, and how to maintain morale. The discussions were intense, often running long into the night with no simple answers. Each leader carried the weight of millions of lives on their shoulders. At one remote observatory, a scientist looked at the incoming fleet through a powerful telescope. What she saw made her pulse quicken. The ships were massive, far more advanced than any human technology. Their movements were precise, calculated, and swift. Yet she also noticed something that gave her hope. There was a pattern, a rhythm, that suggested strategy rather than chaos. Perhaps, she thought, humanity could match this intelligence with its own courage and creativity. Everywhere, ordinary people faced their own challenges. Workers in factories continued to produce critical materials. Farmers made sure food reached cities. Teachers explained complex ideas to anxious students, and volunteers organized shelters and support networks. Every small act contributed to the larger effort, creating a sense that humanity was standing together against the unknown. Even as fear lingered, moments of humanity shone through. Soldiers shared letters and messages with their families, engineers celebrated small technical victories, and friends found solace in humor and shared stories. These simple acts reminded everyone that while the threat was immense, the essence of human life, hope, connection, and resilience remained intact. The night before the fleet was set to depart, the city below the command centers was quiet, almost unnaturally so. Street lights glimmered, casting long shadows. People walked home from their last errands, pausing to look up at the sky. Some whispered prayers, some exchanged words of reassurance, and others simply stood, feeling the weight of what was about to unfold. Sleep came fitfully to many, and for some, it did not come at all. In the command centers and spaceports, the fleet was almost ready. The crew had been briefed, the ships fueled and armed, and the plans meticulously reviewed. Every individual, from the highest-ranking officer to the youngest technician, knew that history was being written, that their actions could determine the fate of the planet. And yet, despite the fear and uncertainty, a quiet determination settled over them. Humanity, for all its flaws, would face the unknown with courage. As the first light of dawn touched the horizon, the assembled fleet shimmered under the morning sun. Soldiers, engineers, scientists, and leaders took a moment to look at the ships that represented years of effort, of dreams, and of hope. There was no cheering, no grand ceremony, just a shared understanding. The moment had come. Humanity was ready to meet the challenge, whatever it might bring. And in the silent vastness of space beyond, the unknown threat continued its approach, unaware that the people it meant to intimidate were already united, already prepared, and already determined. The stage was set, the players were ready, and the story of humanity's courage was about to unfold in ways no one could yet imagine. The fleet was ready, but preparation was far from over. Inside the massive hangars, engineers and technicians moved quickly, checking every system, running countless diagnostics, and repairing even the tiniest faults. Every ship was a marvel of human technology, but in the minds of those preparing it, every imperfection could have consequences too great to imagine. Sweat ran down foreheads, hands moved skillfully across complex machinery, and eyes never left the monitors that displayed millions of data points. Soldiers and pilots gathered for final briefings. They sat in rows in dimly lit rooms, their faces tense yet determined. Officers spoke clearly and methodically, explaining maneuvers, tactics, and emergency protocols. The words were precise, but the weight behind them was unmistakable. Every life depended on understanding the plan, on following orders exactly, and on trusting one another. Some young recruits glanced nervously at their older comrades, silently asking if they would be able to live up to expectations. The veterans gave reassuring nods, a simple gesture that carried more meaning than words could convey. Outside the briefing rooms, families made their quiet goodbyes. Mothers and fathers held their children tightly, remembering the small moments of laughter and warmth they might not see again for months. Spouses whispered promises to return safely, though each knew the danger that lay ahead. Friends exchanged letters and small gifts, little tokens of hope that would be carried in their hearts, even in the darkest moments. Each farewell was personal, emotional, and filled with the human fear of loss that no technology could erase. In the control centers, analysts worked tirelessly. Data streamed in from every sensor, every satellite, every early warning system. The incoming fleet's trajectory was carefully monitored, and countless simulations were run to predict its next move. Specialists debated in hushed tones, weighing one possibility against another, knowing that their recommendations could shape the first encounter. They were highly trained, precise in their calculations, but behind the screens, a quiet anxiety lingered. Every decision mattered, and the uncertainty gnawed even the most confident minds. At the same time, pilots prepared in the simulators. They ran through emergency drills, practiced evasive maneuvers, and simulated attacks against forces that were still largely unknown. The simulators shook with the intensity of virtual battles, and each trainee experienced the fear and adrenaline that would one day be very real. The exercises were grueling, testing not just technical skill, but focus, endurance, and emotional strength. Some emerged exhausted, others exhilarated, but all carried the understanding that the coming confrontation would demand everything from them. Engineers worked around the clock, repairing, calibrating, and double-checking every system. Some focused on engines that could propel massive ships through the void, while others monitored weapon systems designed to defend against unimaginable threats. Each adjustment, each calculation was crucial. A single mistake could cost lives, yet despite the pressure, a quiet sense of pride filled the rooms. Every small victory in preparation reminded them that humanity was capable of incredible feats when it acted together. The commanders met repeatedly to refine strategies. They debated formations, communication protocols, and fallback plans. Every scenario, no matter how unlikely, was considered. Maps of space routes were spread across tables, and holographic projections displayed the movement of both human and unknown forces. Even in the midst of strategy sessions, the human element was clear. Leaders worried not just about tactics, but about the well-being of those under their command. They understood that courage was not measured only by skill or strength, but by the willingness to face the unknown with determination. At the fleet assembly points, the magnitude of the operation became clear. Ships lined up like giant metallic birds ready to soar into the void. Each vessel carried hundreds of crew members, their lives bound together by duty and shared purpose. Observers walked between the massive hulls, marveling at the precision and scale of the construction. Here, technology met humanity in its purest form, the blending of knowledge, skill, and spirit. Some individuals carried personal burdens even amidst the professional rigor. A young communications officer worried about keeping in touch with a sibling back home, fearing that even with advanced technology, messages might not arrive in time. A pilot fretted over a mistake made during training, replaying it endlessly in the mind and imagining the worst outcomes. A mechanic struggled to fix a stubborn piece of equipment, feeling the pressure of knowing that every adjustment could determine the success or failure of the fleet. These personal stories ran alongside the larger narrative of preparation, making the unfolding events deeply human. Amidst all this activity, moments of quiet reflection emerged. Soldiers gazed at the stars, imagining distant worlds and the lives they might encounter. Engineers paused to admire the intricate designs they had helped bring to life. Families, separated by necessity, found solace in short messages or stolen moments of conversation. These small acts reminded everyone that even in the face of global-scale danger, human connection remained vital. As the launch approached, tension increased. Every sensor was checked, every system verified, every route analyzed. Engineers worked in teams, communicating through headsets and hand signals, each aware that failure was not an option. Soldiers stood ready at their posts, muscles tense, senses sharpened. Commanders walked the decks of the massive ships, offering quiet encouragement and observing the final preparations. The air was thick with anticipation, and yet a strange calm settled over many who had accepted the reality of what was to come. Training continued even in these final hours. Pilots ran through last-minute exercises, testing both their skill and their nerves. Engineers performed final stress tests on engines, weapons, and shields. Even support staff, from medics to technicians, reviewed protocols, understanding that their role was as crucial as that of those directly facing the enemy. Every individual understood that preparation was not a task with a clear endpoint. It was a mindset, a continuous commitment to excellence under pressure. In one quiet corner of the hangar, a small group of soldiers shared stories from home. They laughed softly, the sound carrying strangely amid the clanging of machinery and the hum of engines. These moments of normalcy, brief as they were, provided comfort. They reminded the crew of why they fought, not just for survival, but for family, for friends, for the ordinary lives that might otherwise be lost. As night fell, the city below the fleet's assembly points was alive with light. Families stayed up late, watching news updates, following every report, and praying quietly. Streets that had been bustling with daytime activity now shimmered under the glow of lamps and screens. People shared stories of bravery and hope, of strangers helping one another, of communities uniting in the face of fear. Humanity's strength was not just in technology or strategy, but in this shared resilience. Inside the ships, a final sense of readiness settled over the crew. Systems hummed steadily, consoles glowed softly, and alarms were quiet but poised to respond. The sense of anticipation was almost tangible, a living pulse running through every corridor and control room. Officers walked among their teams, offering quiet words of encouragement and final instructions. Pilots adjusted seats, checked equipment, and took deep breaths, mentally preparing for the journey ahead. every individual, from the highest-ranking commander to the youngest technician, carried the same understanding. The coming moments would test every skill, every decision, and every ounce of courage they had. Yet despite the pressure, there was hope, a belief that humanity, united and determined, could face the unknown and prevail. As the first hours of the operation approached, the world watched. Citizens followed updates on screens, monitoring the fleet as it prepared to leave orbit. Scientists and analysts continued their calculations, ensuring that every possible outcome was considered. Soldiers and pilots stood ready, the weight of responsibility pressing on them, yet also strengthening their resolve. Engineers made last-minute adjustments, ensuring that every system functioned perfectly. The quiet of the hangars was interrupted only by the occasional clatter of tools or the hum of machinery. Outside, the night sky stretched endlessly, a canvas of stars that reminded everyone of both the beauty and the enormity of the universe. Humanity was about to step into the unknown, armed with skill, determination, and the unyielding spirit that had carried it through countless challenges. And in those final hours, as the fleet's engines powered up and the first signs of movement began, a sense of unity prevailed. Despite fear, despite uncertainty, despite the unknown threat approaching from beyond the stars, humanity was ready. Preparation had transformed anxiety into purpose. Every individual, from the ground crews to the officers in command, understood that they were part of something greater than themselves. The countdown had begun. The fleet would soon depart. And humanity, in all its complexity, courage, and determination, was prepared to face whatever awaited in the vastness of space. The fleet had left Earth's orbit, gliding into the vast emptiness of space. The hum of engines, steady and powerful, filled the ships as they formed a vast convoy, stretching farther than the eye or even sensors could reach. Each ship carried hundreds, sometimes thousands of people, all trained, all prepared, and yet still feeling the subtle, gnawing tension of the unknown. The stars, once a distant decoration of the night sky, now seemed impossibly close and infinitely more mysterious. Inside one of the largest vessels, the bridge was alive with activity. Officers monitored every system, every trajectory, and every possible threat. Their eyes flicked between screens and holographic displays, hands moving over controls with practiced precision. Yet, beneath the professionalism, there was a quiet unease. No one had ever faced anything quite like this. They were venturing into the unknown, into space that had been silent for millennia, now filled with the shadow of an approaching enemy. The crew had little time for rest. Pilots continued drills in virtual simulators, testing formations, evasive maneuvers, and emergency procedures. Engineers ran diagnostics on engines, shields, and communication systems. Even medics and support staff reviewed contingency plans, ensuring that everyone knew their role if the unexpected occurred. Every individual, no matter their rank or specialty, carried the same understanding. In the cold and infinite expanse of space, there would be no second chances. Despite the tension, moments of human connection and normalcy persisted. Small groups gathered to share a meal or exchange stories. They laughed quietly, though often the laughter was tinged with nervousness. Some shared letters from home, reading aloud the words of loved ones, finding comfort in their reminders of ordinary life. Others quietly gazed through observation windows, marveling at the stars and planets that passed by in silent procession. Even in the vast emptiness, humanity's spirit persisted, shining brighter than any technology. The vastness of space made even routine travel a test of patience and endurance. Days blurred into nights as the fleet maintained formation, engines humming like the heartbeat of a living organism. For some, the monotony was a source of anxiety. Every quiet moment seemed too calm, every passing star a reminder of the unknown that lay ahead. Yet others found a strange peace in the rhythm of the journey. the regularity of drills, meals, and monitoring screens offering a sense of control in an uncontrollable situation. In one corridor, a young technician moved from station to station, checking communication systems, ensuring that signals between ships remained uninterrupted. His hands moved quickly, but his mind wandered briefly to thoughts of home. He imagined the morning sun, the smell of rain-soaked streets, and the quiet hum of a neighborhood that now felt worlds away. The thought of what they were facing, an enemy unseen, a battle yet unfought, brought both fear and a strange determination. Meanwhile, in the bridge's observation deck, officers and commanders studied scans of the approaching enemy. Every sensor, every signal, was analyzed for signs of movement, strategy, and intent. The enemy remained distant, almost ethereal, yet their presence was undeniable. Data streams illuminated the room, painting patterns and anomalies across holographic displays. Every flicker of information could be crucial. Every interpretation could shape the next moment of action. And yet, no one pretended to have all the answers. They planned, they calculated, but they knew that in the unknown, surprises were inevitable. Among the crew, personal stories continued to unfold. A young pilot practiced maneuvers repeatedly, sweat glistening on her forehead, determined to perfect every move. A medic quietly tended to minor injuries and exhaustion, offering reassurance and calm words to those who doubted their readiness. Engineers huddled over complex circuits and engines, their teamwork a testament to human ingenuity and persistence. Every story, every effort, reinforced the sense that humanity's strength was more than technology. It was resilience, cooperation, and courage. Some moments were quieter, almost contemplative. Crew members stood at observation windows, watching distant stars, planets, and debris drift by. They imagined the billions of lives across the universe, the histories and struggles that might exist elsewhere. These thoughts brought both awe and humility. Humanity, despite its achievements, was still small in the grand scale of space. Yet it was precisely this smallness, combined with determination and ingenuity, that gave them hope. The fleet's journey was also marked by routine maintenance, training exercises, and small celebrations of success. When a communication system passed its final diagnostic test, engineers exchanged smiles and quiet congratulations. When a pilot executed a perfect simulation, peers nodded in approval. These small victories, though seemingly insignificant in the face of an approaching enemy, strengthened morale and reminded everyone that preparation was not only about equipment, but about human spirit. As the fleet approached the area where the enemy had been detected, tension thickened like a physical weight. Every sensor was double-checked, every system tested once more. The bridge became a hive of controlled activity, with officers moving swiftly between stations, issuing commands, and ensuring that everyone was aligned. Conversations were brief, but precise, every word carrying weight. The crew had trained for months, but training could never fully replicate the uncertainty of what lay ahead. Amidst the tension, small acts of courage emerged. A communications officer adjusted frequencies manually when automated systems failed, ensuring that no messages were lost. A pilot volunteered for an extra simulation run, despite exhaustion, knowing that any preparation could make the difference. Engineers stayed hours past their shifts, working to perfect critical systems. These acts, quiet and often unnoticed, reflected the human heart of the fleet, the commitment, the bravery, and the willingness to endure hardship for the collective good. As they moved deeper into space, the crew observed phenomena they had never imagined. Clouds of cosmic dust shimmered in the distance, reflecting light in ways that seemed almost magical. Distant stars twinkled with unfamiliar colors, and planets drifted silently, ancient and unchanging. These glimpses of beauty contrasted sharply with the anxiety of the mission, yet also reminded the crew of what they were fighting to protect the fragile, luminous life of their home, Earth, and the ordinary wonders that made it precious. Despite the preparation and the marvel of technology, fear was never far. Some crew members spent hours reviewing protocols, checking and rechecking, as if repetition could ward off the unknown. Others struggled with sleeplessness, haunted by visions of failure or loss. Commanders walked among them, offering encouragement, but also recognizing that fear was a natural companion on such a journey. It was not absence of fear that mattered, but how humanity chose to face it. The journey was long, but time seemed both to stretch and compress. Days of travel felt like weeks, yet events passed in the blink of an eye. Every moment was punctuated by routine, preparation, and vigilance. Crew members formed bonds, sharing stories, offering advice, and comforting each other. These relationships, forged in the quiet tension of a shared mission, became a lifeline. Humanity, despite its size and complexity, had a way of finding connection, even in the vastest void. In one quiet moment, a small group gathered to share a meal. Laughter was sparse but genuine. Stories of home and childhood whispered amid the hum of machinery. They talked about simple joys, the smell of rain, the taste of favorite foods, and the sound of familiar voices. For a brief time, the weight of the unknown faded, replaced by a sense of normalcy and shared humanity. These moments, fleeting though they were, reminded everyone why they had chosen to be here, to protect the ordinary. Beautiful life that might otherwise be lost. As the fleet drew closer to the expected location of the enemy, tension transformed into anticipation. Every officer, every crew member, every engineer and medic felt the weight of what was coming. They had trained, they had prepared, and yet they knew that nothing could fully replicate the unknown. The enemy's presence was still distant, their intentions unclear, but the time for waiting was ending. The first steps of confrontation were near, and the human heart beat faster with a mix of fear, determination, and courage. In the observation deck, a veteran officer spoke quietly to a group of young pilots. "Remember," he said, "what makes us strong is not just these ships or these weapons. It's the people inside them. Trust in each other. Trust in yourselves. That is what will carry us through." His words, simple yet profound, settled over the group like a steadying hand. It was a reminder that even amidst technology and strategy, the essence of humanity, courage, connection, and resolve was the greatest strength of all. Finally, as the fleet approached the coordinates where the enemy had been last detected, silence fell over the command centers. The hum of engines continued, the monitors glowed softly, but a quiet tension pervaded every room. The moment of contact, the first glimpse of the unknown force, was imminent. Crew members adjusted their seats, took deep breaths, and prepared themselves mentally and physically. The unknown loomed ahead, but humanity had come this far together, and they would face it united, ready for whatever awaited. The journey had tested endurance, patience, and courage. It had revealed the best of humanity: teamwork, determination, creativity. The fleet had reached the edge of the area where the enemy had been detected. The vast darkness of space seemed almost heavier here, as though it were holding its breath. Inside the ships, every sensor was active, every system running at peak performance. Officers and crews stared at glowing displays, eyes scanning for even the slightest movement. The tension was nearly tangible, pressing on everyone's shoulders with a weight that made the air feel thicker. For many on the fleet, this was the moment they had trained for, the moment they had imagined countless times during long drills and simulations. Yet nothing in training could fully prepare them for the uncertainty of what awaited. Every human heart raced with a mixture of fear, determination, and curiosity. Some whispered quiet prayers, others focused intently on their duties, hands moving automatically over controls that had been memorized through endless repetition. The first signs of the enemy appeared on the sensors. faint blips, irregular shapes that shifted and moved in ways that defied normal patterns. Analysts leaned over displays, zooming in and recalculating positions. The unknown fleet was massive, its ships sleek, fast, and unlike anything humanity had ever encountered. Officers called for calm, instructing the crew to maintain formation, to stay vigilant, and to prepare for all possibilities. Pilots gripped their controls tightly. Their hands were steady, but their minds raced with questions. What did the enemy look like up close? How many ships were there? Were they hostile, or had the signals been a warning rather than a threat? Every passing second brought more uncertainty, yet there was no room for hesitation. The training and preparation that had carried them this far would now be tested in the moments to come. As the fleet approached, the first visual confirmation came through the observation decks. Massive ships, glinting faintly in the dim light of distant stars, moving in patterns that were both precise and unpredictable. Gasps and murmurs ran through the crew. Some stared in awe, fascinated by the technology and scale of the enemy. Others felt fear tightening in their chests, a visceral reaction to the unknown. But despite their emotions, every person remained at their post, focused and alert, ready to act on command. The commanders initiated standard engagement protocols. Communications were tightened, shields activated, and weapon systems powered up. Soldiers and engineers ran through last-minute checks, ensuring that every system would function if the enemy chose to attack. The tension was so dense, it was almost a physical presence. Yet amidst it all, the calm professionalism of the crew shone through. Each person understood that panic would serve no one, and that preparation, focus, and teamwork were their greatest assets. Then something strange began to happen. The enemy ships, once moving in deliberate, seemingly coordinated patterns, started to shift erratically. Some blinked in and out of sensors' range, others seemed to vanish entirely from view. Analysts double-checked their equipment, assuming some technical malfunction, but everything appeared to be functioning normally. The enemy was literally disappearing, as though retreating before any engagement had occurred. Confusion rippled through the fleet. Officers exchanged quick, urgent messages, verifying readings, rechecking sensors, and confirming visual data. Crew members leaned closer to their consoles, disbelief written on their faces. Pilots adjusted positions, expecting sudden maneuvers or attacks that never came. Engineers stared at diagnostic screens, trying to find a rational explanation for the sudden retreat. The phenomenon defied everything humanity had predicted, every scenario they had prepared for. Some of the younger crew whispered among themselves, sharing stunned glances. "Did we see that right?" One asked quietly. Others nodded, their expressions a mix of awe and relief. No one knew why the enemy had vanished, but the fact remained. Humanity had arrived, and the enemy had chosen not to engage. The implications were staggering, both reassuring and unsettling. The unknown force, feared and anticipated for months, had dissolved before humanity could even act. Commanders called for calm, but acknowledged the unprecedented situation. "Stay alert," one officer instructed, his voice steady but firm. "Do not assume this is over. We do not yet understand their intent." The fleet maintained formation, shields up, weapons ready, even as the enemy continued to disappear from sensors and visual confirmation. Every person on board was aware that they were witnessing something extraordinary, an enemy fleet retreating without direct confrontation. Meanwhile, on the observation decks, the scene was breathtaking. The empty darkness of space was suddenly punctuated by faint traces where enemy ships had once been, then nothing. Some crew members felt an exhilaration that they had never known, a surge of pride and relief mixed with lingering tension. Others remained wary, eyes scanning the void for any sign of return. The human mind struggled to process what had happened. An enemy too powerful to ignore had vanished, leaving the fleet unchallenged. The analysts worked furiously to understand the event. They examined every data point, every irregularity in sensor readings. Patterns emerged. The enemy had moved in a way that suggested awareness of humanity's fleet, strategic withdrawal, and an assessment of risk rather than recklessness. Slowly, a picture began to form. The enemy had recognized the preparation, the unity, and the strength of humanity, and had chosen to retreat rather than engage. Across the fleet, relief mixed with disbelief. Crew members began to share stories of what they had witnessed, describing the vanishing ships, the sudden emptiness, and the odd sense of awe that accompanied the moment. Some laughed nervously, unable to contain a mixture of joy and shock. Others remained silent, lost in thought, imagining the reasons behind the sudden disappearance. It was a strange victory, one without conflict, but no less profound for the human spirit. Commanders decided to maintain vigilance, keeping the fleet on high alert while cautiously moving forward. Every sensor was monitored, every communication line remained open, and crews were reminded that caution was still necessary. The unknown had revealed itself as both fragile and intelligent, and humanity had learned its first lesson. Preparation, unity, and determination could influence even the most formidable adversaries. As the fleet slowly advanced, the crew began to absorb the reality of what had happened. Conversations bubbled quietly in corridors and mess halls. Soldiers and pilots discussed what they had seen. Engineers shared their theories, and medics offered quiet smiles and encouragement. The human spirit, tested and stretched by fear and anticipation, found relief in connection. Shared experience, shared astonishment, and shared courage created bonds stronger than any steel or technology. Even as excitement spread, moments of reflection persisted. Some crew members gazed at the empty space where the enemy had been, contemplating the magnitude of the encounter. Scientists considered what the retreat implied about intelligence, strategy, and understanding across civilizations. Pilots thought about the importance of training, precision, and courage. Every human perspective, whether technical, emotional, or strategic, highlighted a common thread. Humanity had faced the unknown and emerged with both relief and insight. The fleet continued its cautious advance, now aware that the enemy might not always reveal itself, that the unknown could choose when or if to engage. This understanding reinforced the value of vigilance, teamwork, and preparation. Every individual, from the lowest-ranking crew member to the highest-ranking officer, realized that their role mattered, that their skill, courage, and dedication contributed to the collective strength that had caused the enemy to retreat. In one quiet moment, a young engineer looked out at the vast expanse, feeling a sense of pride and awe. They had helped build the systems, fine-tuned the engines, and prepared the fleet. And now, humanity had arrived, ready and capable, and the unknown had chosen to vanish. The emotion was difficult to describe. Relief, pride, wonder, and a lingering thrill that came from knowing they had faced the unknown and been recognized. In some way, as a force to be respected, commanders gathered for an emergency meeting, analyzing the strange retreat and deciding on next steps. The consensus was clear. The fleet would remain on high alert, but continue toward the expected location of the enemy. Even if the threat had withdrawn, the lessons learned were invaluable. Humanity had demonstrated unity, preparation, and courage on a scale never before seen. The fleet was not only a military force, it was a symbol of what human determination could achieve. As the hours passed, crew members began to adjust to the unusual calm. Training exercises resumed, maintenance continued, and communication drills were conducted with renewed focus. Yet, beneath the routine, a quiet excitement persisted. The impossible had occurred. Humanity had arrived, and the enemy had vanished. The encounter, though brief and without conflict, had proven something profound about the resilience and capability of the human spirit. In the observation decks, crew members shared quiet conversations about what had happened. Did they really retreat because of us? One asked, voice low but full of wonder. Another nodded, smiling slightly. I think they saw we were ready. That's enough. The simplicity of the thought, the clarity of the realization, resonated deeply. Humanity had arrived prepared, and that alone had changed the course of events. The night continued in space, quiet but alert. Crew members. The fleet moved cautiously through the silent vastness of space, still alert despite the enemy's sudden disappearance. The strange encounter had left the crew both relieved and uneasy. No one knew why the enemy had vanished, and that uncertainty lingered like a shadow over every decision. Analysts pored over the data again and again, searching for patterns, signals, anything that could explain the unexpected retreat. Every reading, every anomaly, was scrutinized, discussed, and debated. But the conclusion remained elusive. The enemy had left voluntarily, and humanity had not fired a single shot inside the command centers. Leaders gathered to make sense of the event. Their discussions were intense, measured, and deliberate. Some argued that the enemy had perceived humanity's strength and cohesion and chosen to retreat rather than risk confrontation. Others suggested that the fleet's advanced technology, carefully prepared strategies, and visible readiness had acted as a deterrent. Still others believed that something about humanity's unpredictable spirit, the courage, determination, and creativity that could not be measured by sensors or simulations, might have influenced the enemy's decision. Each theory was explored with care, reflecting the complexity of the situation and the intelligence of the human mind. For the crew, the event had been a mix of awe, relief, and lingering tension. Soldiers discussed what they had seen in hushed tones, comparing observations and trying to make sense of the retreat. Pilots replayed maneuvers and sensor readings in their minds, imagining how events might have unfolded differently. Engineers examined the performance of their systems with renewed pride, realizing that their preparation had played a role in demonstrating humanity's capability. Even medics and support staff felt a quiet satisfaction, understanding that their collective effort had contributed to a moment of history. Across the fleet, conversations shifted naturally from fear to reflection. Crew members shared stories of what had passed through their minds when the enemy first appeared and then vanished. One pilot described the strange mixture of adrenaline and disbelief as blips disappeared from the sensors. An engineer spoke of the exhilaration at realizing that months of hard work had contributed to a fleet strong enough to deter the enemy without conflict. The human response was varied, yet united: awe at the scale of the unknown, pride in humanity's preparation, and a recognition of courage in every individual aboard the ships. In quieter corners of the fleet, people took a moment to look at the stars. From observation windows, they watched distant planets drift silently, constellations they had only studied in books, now vivid and alive. The vastness of space, once intimidating, now felt like a canvas on which humanity had asserted its presence. It was a reminder that every small action, the meticulous work of engineers, the precision of pilots, the calm vigilance of soldiers had contributed to the fleet's ability to project strength across light years. Humanity had not only arrived, but had made its presence felt. Analysts continued their work late into the simulated night cycles aboard the fleet. They modeled every possible scenario, replayed the encounter through countless simulations, and tried to understand the motivations of a force that had not yet been fully seen. Slowly, patterns emerged. The enemy's retreat had been strategic, not random. Their movements suggested recognition of preparation, cohesion, and readiness. Humanity's unity, technology, and determination had been visible in ways the unknown had acknowledged and respected. This insight filled the analysts with both relief and awe. The fleet commanders began to share these insights with their crews. In meetings and over communication channels, they explained that humanity's preparedness had made a difference. It was not a victory in battle, but it was a victory in influence, the ability to shape the enemy's behavior without firing a single shot. This realization brought quiet celebrations across the fleet. Engineers clapped each other on the back, pilots smiled at their teams, and soldiers exchanged nods of pride. The event had proven that courage, preparation, and unity were as powerful as any weapon. Amid the strategic reflection, human stories continued to unfold. A young pilot, exhausted from hours of vigilance, allowed herself a small smile as she imagined telling her family about the strange encounter. A communications officer sent a message to friends at home, carefully describing the awe and relief she felt. Engineers quietly marked small victories in their logs, noting the flawless performance of critical systems. The combination of professional accomplishment and human emotion created a tapestry of pride, relief, and shared triumph. As the fleet moved forward, scientists analyzed every aspect of the encounter. They examined energy signatures, speed and formation patterns, and any residual anomalies that might indicate intelligence, strategy, or motivation. Their conclusions began to converge. The enemy had calculated risk, assessed humanity's readiness, and made a deliberate choice to withdraw. Humanity had demonstrated its strength not by attack, but by showing readiness, cohesion, and unyielding resolve. The lesson was clear. Preparation and unity could influence outcomes, even when the opponent remained largely unknown. Even as analysis continued, the human side of the story persisted. Soldiers and pilots discussed the emotional impact of seeing the enemy vanish. They spoke about fear giving way to awe, uncertainty giving way to confidence, and individual effort contributing to a collective strength that had shaped the encounter. Conversations were quiet, respectful, and full of insight. The crew realized that courage was not measured in moments of action alone, but in consistent preparedness, in the willingness to face fear, and in the commitment to each other. Families back on Earth followed updates with intense focus. They read reports, watched communications from the fleet, and shared quiet celebrations of relief and pride. Communities discussed the unusual outcome with wonder, speculating on the reasons behind the enemy's retreat. Across nations, people reflected on humanity's capacity for cooperation, preparation, and courage. The unknown had revealed itself as intelligent, but humanity had demonstrated an even more remarkable intelligence, the ability to work together, prepare meticulously, and face the unknown with determination. In the fleet, moments of personal reflection were as important as professional duties. A medic quietly observed the calm efficiency of the crew, reflecting on the human resilience that had enabled them to face an unknown force without panic. A young engineer walked along the corridors, thinking about the countless hours spent building and testing systems that had contributed to this moment. A pilot gazed through the observation window, imagining the vast reaches of space and the lives that might exist beyond. Each person understood that humanity's strength was rooted in both capability and spirit. Even amidst relief, caution remained. Commanders reminded their crews that the enemy could return at any moment. Vigilance, preparation, and focus were essential. The unknown had not been defeated. It had only been deterred. Every officer emphasized that the lessons of the encounter were critical. Unity, readiness, and courage had influenced the enemy's behavior, but the mission was far from over. Humanity had learned a powerful truth, but it had to continue to apply it. Training and maintenance continued with renewed purpose. Pilots ran exercises with new intensity. Engineers double-checked critical systems, and medics reviewed emergency protocols. Every action reinforced the understanding that the fleet's strength was not an individual effort alone, but in the collective dedication of everyone aboard. The strange encounter had revealed the invisible power of preparation, coordination, and human determination. It was a lesson that no simulation could fully convey, learned only through the reality of facing the unknown. Across the fleet, quiet celebrations emerged. Crew members shared stories of the unusual encounter, described their awe and relief, and acknowledged the contributions of colleagues in every role. The human aspect of the fleet compassion, teamwork, and resilience was as much a part of the victory as any machine or strategy. Engineers, pilots, soldiers, and medics recognized that their combined efforts had shaped events, influencing a force far larger and more mysterious than themselves. The night cycles aboard the ships were filled with reflection. Crew members took turns standing at observation windows, gazing at the stars, imagining the enormity of space, and marveling at humanity's capacity to make a difference. They thought about loved ones, communities, and the fragile beauty of life on Earth. The strange retreat of the enemy had revealed not only the unknown, but the potential of humanity's courage, ingenuity, and unity. Analysts continued to model the event, learning from every detail. They considered energy signatures, fleet movements, and possible psychological factors. Slowly, a clearer understanding emerged. The enemy had recognized both the visible and invisible strength of humanity. It was not brute force that had caused retreat, but the demonstration of preparation, intelligence, and cohesion. Humanity had projected power without aggression, influence without conflict, and courage without combat. As days passed, crew members adjusted to a new rhythm. Routine operations continued, but the memory of the encounter lingered. Conversations reflected both awe and insight, combining technical analysis with personal reflection. Soldiers, pilots, and engineers understood that their actions mattered not. The fleet began its journey back toward Earth, the long stretch of space ahead illuminated by distant stars. Unlike the outbound trip, there was a quiet confidence aboard every vessel. The tension that had accompanied the unknown enemy's arrival and sudden retreat had transformed into a mix of relief, reflection, and cautious pride. Crew members moved through the corridors with a sense of calm purpose, knowing that their preparation, vigilance, and courage had left a mark on an enemy unseen and an unknown challenge met inside the bridges of the ships. Officers reviewed the data from the encounter again and again. Every sensor reading, every log entry, and every analysis contributed to a clearer understanding of what had happened. The fleet's collective intelligence had been tested not by combat, but by the subtle dynamics of presence, readiness, and human determination. The conclusion was inescapable. Humanity's unity, preparation, and skill had influenced events in ways no one had fully anticipated. It was a victory not of destruction, but of awareness and strength. Crew members engaged in quieter reflection, thinking about what they had witnessed and what it meant for humanity. Pilots described the awe of seeing a powerful force vanish without a shot fired. Engineers discussed how meticulous attention to detail and flawless execution of systems had projected a power that could not be ignored. Soldiers considered the courage required to face the unknown, even when fear threatened to overwhelm them. Medics and support staff reflected on the resilience they had witnessed in the fleet. Across roles and ranks, there was a shared understanding. Humanity's strength was not in any single weapon, ship, or strategy, but in the people who had made it all possible. The fleet's corridors were filled with a quiet energy. People exchanged stories of the encounter, shared personal reflections, and laughed quietly at moments of nervous relief. A young pilot spoke about the first sight of the enemy, describing the strange mixture of fear and awe that surged through the cockpit. An engineer recounted the tense moments spent ensuring that critical systems were functioning perfectly, marveling at how small, precise actions could ripple outward into an effect that influenced the enemy's behavior. Conversations like these reminded everyone that human courage and dedication had shaped the encounter in profound ways. Families and communities back on Earth followed every update with intense interest. They read reports, watched live communications from the fleet, and discussed the implications of the enemy's disappearance. Pride and admiration for the fleet's crew grew across nations, as people realized that humanity's preparedness and unity had made a tangible difference in the universe. Even in moments of calm, citizens marveled at how the collective effort of thousands of individuals, each performing their role with focus and determination, could influence forces that seemed larger, faster, and more advanced than humanity itself. Training and routines continued aboard the fleet, but with a renewed sense of purpose. Pilots practiced maneuvers, engineers maintained systems, and soldiers reviewed protocols, not out of fear, but out of understanding that vigilance and preparedness were the hallmarks of strength. Crew members took pride in their roles, recognizing that every small effort, from meticulous maintenance to quiet observation, had contributed to a moment of profound influence. Humanity had learned that readiness, unity, and determination could project power as effectively as weapons themselves. The observation decks offered moments of quiet reflection for those who sought it. Crew members gazed at the stars, marveling at their immensity and beauty, contemplating the vastness of space and the unknown forces that might exist beyond human understanding. For many, it was a time to appreciate the fragility and resilience of life on Earth, the bonds of family and community, and the extraordinary courage that had carried them through the encounter. It was a reminder that the mission was about more than strategy or technology. It was about protecting life, hope, and the human spirit. In private corners, individuals reflected on personal growth and resilience. A medic thought about the calm courage displayed by crew members during tense moments, understanding that bravery often emerges in quiet, uncelebrated ways. A young engineer considered the months of preparation, long hours, and meticulous attention to detail that had contributed to the fleet's success. A pilot reflected on fear transformed into focus, anxiety channeled into precise action. Each story was a testament to the human capacity for growth, adaptation, and strength in the face of uncertainty. Commanders met regularly to debrief and analyze lessons learned. They discussed strategies, technologies, and procedures, but the conversation always returned to a central truth. Human courage, cohesion, and preparation had shaped the outcome. No single decision or act had determined the encounter. It had been the combination of thousands of individuals, performing their roles with focus, determination, and trust in one another. Humanity had demonstrated that it could influence even an unknown and powerful adversary, not by force alone, but by projecting unity and readiness. The fleet's return journey allowed moments of celebration and camaraderie. Crew members shared meals, laughed quietly, and reflected on what they had learned. Engineers marked systems that had performed flawlessly. Pilots recounted moments of clarity during tense maneuvers, and soldiers shared stories of quiet heroism. Even the smallest actions, checking equipment, monitoring sensors, providing encouragement, had contributed to a collective strength that had reshaped the encounter. Humanity had faced the unknown, and through preparation and courage, earned recognition without a single shot fired. As the fleet neared Earth's orbit, anticipation and pride grew among the crew. They thought about the families awaiting them, the communities that had supported them from afar, and the significance of what they had accomplished. It was not a conventional victory in battle, but it was a victory in a deeper sense. Humanity had faced the unknown, demonstrated readiness, and influenced events through courage, preparation, and unity. The significance of this achievement resonated deeply with every individual aboard. Back on Earth, people prepared to welcome the fleet home. Streets were lined with crowds, families held banners, and communities organized celebrations. Even though no battle had been fought, there was pride in humanity's achievement. The stories of courage, preparation, and unity had spread, inspiring admiration and hope. Humanity had demonstrated its capability on a cosmic scale, proving that even the most advanced unknown forces could recognize and respect strength born of focus, preparation, and cohesion. The moment of return was filled with emotion. Crew members stood at observation windows, gazing at Earth, marveling at the planet's fragility and beauty. Many thought of the families, friends, and communities they had left behind, feeling gratitude and connection. Others reflected on the months of preparation, the countless hours of training, and the shared dedication that had carried them through the unknown. Humanity's journey had been as much about internal growth, resilience, and courage as it had been about technology or strategy. The fleet slowly descended into orbit, greeted by cheers and celebrations. Pilots and crew members received messages of admiration from families and leaders alike. Engineers were thanked for their meticulous work, soldiers for their dedication, and support staff for their quiet, essential contributions. Every individual understood that their efforts had mattered, and that humanity's unity, courage, and preparation had shaped an encounter that might otherwise have been chaotic or dangerous. In the days following their return, crew members took time to reflect and share stories. Debriefings combined technical analysis with personal accounts, emphasizing the lessons learned not only about strategy, but about human strength. Humanity had learned that courage was not only about confrontation, but about preparation, focus, and cohesion. The fleet's journey had demonstrated that readiness, intelligence, and unity could influence even unknown adversaries in profound ways. Scientists and strategists on Earth studied the encounter, seeking to understand every detail. They analyzed the retreat patterns of the enemy, reviewed fleet performance, and explored the subtle dynamics that had influenced the outcome. The conclusion was clear. Human preparation, unity, and courage had been decisive. Humanity had learned that strength could be projected without aggression, that readiness could shape events, and that courage, dedication, and focus were among the most powerful tools of all. Crew members also reflected on the emotional impact of the mission. Pilots thought about the moments of fear transformed into clarity. Engineers remembered the satisfaction of systems performing flawlessly under pressure. Soldiers recalled acts of quiet courage that had contributed to a collective presence too strong to be ignored. Medics considered the resilience of the crew and the shared humanity that had carried everyone through an unknown challenge. These reflections reinforced the understanding that the mission had been successful, not only in a technical sense, but in a profoundly human way. The fleet's return became a story told across generations. It was not a story of destruction or conquest, but of human capability, courage, and unity. Communities, families, and leaders celebrated the achievement, understanding that humanity had faced the unknown and emerged stronger, wiser, and more connected. The fleet's journey remnant